A new report reveals that for the first time, social media and video platforms have surpassed traditional news outlets as the dominant source of information globally, posing a significant risk and threat to old media businesses. Let's bring in Dr. Karen Sutherland from the University of the Sunshine Coast. Great to see you. Do you think traditional media will be able to adapt here?
To be honest, I think it has, because a lot of traditional news outlets are now creating content for social media. I think they've had to repurpose. If this means that slowly over time they won't exist anymore, that would be interesting to see. But at this stage, just 54% of the study are using social media to get their news or their main source of news. But it's still 51% are still going to those traditional outlets. So, yeah, it's just over half. But I think it took a while, as you well know, for traditional news outlets to actually embrace social media. And thank God they did, because they would have been left behind long ago, I think.
Yeah, very much. It's interesting though, it comes at a time where Facebook has been arguing in Australia and around the world that in fact it doesn't need news, that's why it doesn't want to pay for news. And yet Facebook, as we see from so many charts, is the #1 source of news for a lot of people, particularly of a generation.
Yes, that is so true. And there are lots of media outlets on Facebook as well, and people sharing and also doing their own commentary. So it'd be interesting to see, like, drill down even further around the types of news. Is it coming direct from the news outlets themselves, or is it coming through people who are citizen journalists or who are just
Well, I think it's a mix of both, isn't it? You think about local newspapers are in trouble, and then you think about this chart here, which shows Facebook is by far the dominant way people get their news, followed by YouTube, Twitter, which is now X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, Snapchat, which is an interesting place to get your news from, and then WhatsApp, where I've been seeing a whole bunch of traditional media organisations essentially trying to jump onto all of these things. It's interesting because we often say in news, you can't be all things to all people, but when it comes to platforms, trying to find a way to digitise one story to make it a story across platforms has been the real task of media organisations, and quite often traditional media managers, news directors, etc. are falling behind. Talk to us about who gains from this media shift.
I think it's the consumers, really, because they get to have their news in whatever way they want it. They get news from all around the world in an instant. They get to be able to share it. They get to be able to comment on it and actually be part of that news process as well. So I think by allowing and putting news on social media, it just widens its scope and widens its reach.
Which is interesting because the UK now following Australia with the under-16s ban on social media. If social media is where we're all getting our news, what happens to younger people who are trying to learn about? I was getting the Australian newspaper delivered to my house when I was 15 years old. I was interested in news young.
Yes, you were very special, and I wish there were more people who would take an interest in news in that way. And some do. Some are really interested in current events, but they are consuming it through social platforms. So you're right. How will they get their news then? 10% of people in this study were actually sourcing their news through ChatGPT and other AI platforms. So that's another avenue that would be interesting to see over the next few years if that increases as well.
I wonder if younger audiences are actually changing journalism too, in terms of, because of the device, the use of device, the way that vertical media is completely different, obviously, to widescreen traditional television media. How do you think younger audiences are changing journalism?
I think they are able to create their own news content themselves. They're able to inject themselves into the conversation too, and that on TikTok all the time, where people will comment on different news stories and they will share things from journalists and talk about the news that affects them too. Issues like the housing crisis and things like that are hugely popular topics on platforms like TikTok, because it's actually affecting them and they can talk about it to an audience that understands, because they're actually living through it. So I think that's the way things are moving, just being able to share your thoughts on news. But I still think you need that base of something coming from a respected news outlet to start the conversation. However, trust in news is also quite down. So in the study, they found that about, it was like 17% said that they believe in the news that comes out of traditional news outlets all the time, whereas most people are very critical. But I guess that's a good thing too. It's good to always really scrutinise the information online, wherever it comes from.
I think ever since subscription, there has been a real push to pick a side for media organisations. Some are far left, some are far right, which obviously means that people have this ongoing feeling that they're being told something. I think one of the biggest issues is the difference between opinion and news generally is based on fact, and even opinion TV networks or opinion newspapers that we are known for their opinion, they still have news departments that do a pretty decent job, particularly during the day. One of the interesting aspects of this, though, is the journalism standards, as you say. And if people are losing faith in journalism, where are they going? Because I get a lot of my news from X, and sometimes the video, thanks to AI, is too good to believe, and it's often not true. So the things that we are going to try and avoid traditional media organisations, they just don't hold up their journalistic standards.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's going to get much more difficult to tell what is true and what is not as AI continues to evolve as well. And so it will almost be up to the platforms to be able to try and police that, but whether they will or not is another story.
All right, now let's move on. The French domestic intelligence agency DGSI ending its contract with the US tech firm Palantir in favour of local competitor Chaps Vision, signalling a shift towards reducing reliance on foreign technology amid rising caution from European governments. Is this a Trump effect, essentially forcing Europe away from US companies?
Possibly, yeah, possibly. It'll be interesting to see if there are other organisations that follow suit from this. But I think it's a smart move. The French government, they're investing more than $1 billion Australian, that's Australian, it's about 655 million in euro, to create their own systems, which may, in the whole scheme of things, may not actually be a lot, but to just ensure that security. And I guess it's also the consistency. We all saw last week what happened with Claude Fable 5. Imagine if you don't actually own these models and these platforms and you're placing all of your trust in them to be consistent to power your systems, and then something can happen and they're gone. So maybe it's a smart move on this part to actually do that and to create your own and look after them yourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because the world seems to be moving into this direction of relying on big tech companies. You think about the SpaceX IPO even over the weekend that raised billions and billions of dollars. And the question that we have is, if they are successful, it is because they have essentially decimated local telecommunications services like, say, Telstra or Optus in Australia, T-Mobile in the US, by making us use our iPhones connected to a satellite. That's all great, but as you say, US technology, and at any time the US government could say, we need this ourselves, leaving us all at risk, right? There is a really big sovereign risk here.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, the US government said with Fable 5, only people outside the US will now no longer have access. And then we did it to everyone. But yeah, that could definitely happen. Absolutely. So how are we going to safeguard against that? And one of the most feasible options is to create your own and then have full control over that.
Easier said than done. Always appreciate your insights, of course. Dr. Karen Sutherland there from the University of the Sunshine Coast. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.